This is the 40th lecture. We're talking, we've covered a lot of territory. The final section now is before us, section number 5, the historical development of the community of faith. Some of the things that, of course, hold them together, but then much to divide them as well. And I've mentioned here that you can search for material in reference to the Sunnis, the Shia, the Sufis on the web or the encyclopedias of Islam. There are a couple of them. One by Glacé is just a single volume, and there is another one put out by the University of Lille, and that is very comprehensive and very, very expensive, but you do find it in most, in significant libraries. So there is a lot of material out there, but you can also find much information on the web, not always as academic or as credible as other things. But here we go on the 5th and final section. We've covered a lot of material, and now we're going to talk a little bit more about the historical development. We'll also include some discussion about what is sometimes called folk practices or popular Islam. Not doing justice to it, of course. There is one class on that just alone. I'll be teaching it here in a few days, 1 week intensive. And we'll be closing today with some charts showing the genealogy of Muhammad. But just in a one figure here. See, there's Muhammad on the chart. You can see that. And then the first breakaway here are the Kharijites. There are no Kharijites today. It was a very fundamentalist, violent group at the time. And today you have people in some parts of the world, they're called Ibadis. They're probably the descendants of the Kharijites, but not certainly violent. And there is no one today called a Kharijite. So then after that breakaway, then you have the break between the Sunnis and the Shiites. Sunni, meaning Sunnis are the majority, probably 85% of them or more, and the Shiites with 10 or 15%. Kharijites are minimal. But that's the major divisions today among Muslims. And then the Shiites in particular have broken up into various sections, various groups. The Sunnis have some dissidents as well, but Islam has not been kind to breakaway groups. They have persecuted them, and they've dealt harshly with them. In fact, they've dealt more harshly with them, for instance, the Ahmadiyas, as we'll see in a minute, than they have with Christians, because they have, Islam really doesn't leave much room for dissent at all. Historical development of the people of faith. The main divisions primarily, of course, are the Sunnis and the Shiites. I wonder if you were to ask an average congressman today the difference between Sunni and Shia. 9 chances out of 10, they wouldn't be able to tell you. Even though they've made decisions about Iraq and on, they really have not understood the differences between the Sunni and the Shiites. But let me just say that the major difference, just to put it simply, the major difference between the Sunni and the Shia is a question over who should rule the community. Okay? The Sunnis have said it should be the most qualified person in the community. The Shia have said it should be the person who is spiritually qualified, has a connection, divine light, more or less, spiritually qualified, and in that sense, the Shiites have been more idealistic. For instance, when the Ayatollah Khomeini he claimed to have a relationship, claimed to have a connection to the 12th Imam, when he turned out to be a dud in the sense of more he was cruel and unjust, and economically the country went downhill. There was a lot of disillusionment because the Imam is set up on a pedestal, who has spiritual, and even today, if you look at Iran, it's not the prime minister, not Ahmadinejad, who has the power so much, but it's the imams who have power. They're the ones who call the shots, and this is true in Iraq as well. That the imams are the ones, because that's what Shia Islam is. It's imamism, and we'll see that more in a little bit of while. But you have then the Kharijites, or the Ibadis, and again, just briefly, by the time Ali comes along and is finally chosen the caliph as caliph, he is resisted by Muawiyah in Iraq, but Ali, even though he is able, I think, to put down the rebellion, he does make a mistake, and he does allow arbitration, because when, for some reason, when they are smart enough to put the page of the Quran on their tips of the swords and call for arbitration, Ali capitulates, and he says, okay, let's do it. But I think it was a mistake, because in that way he loses a faction, a breakaway. They break away. They said, this is crazy. Nobody decides in that way. This is, when you're right, you're right. When you're on God's side, you do what you have to do. You see the purist and absolutist theology of the Kharijites. So he did, as I said, he did crush the rebellion, but the Kharijites, someone killed him, and a survivor of the group killed him. These three caliphs are looked back on. Well, actually, there are four rightly guided caliphs. There was Abu Bakr, there was Umar, there was Uthman, and there was Ali. Of those four, three were assassinated, and yet Muslims will look back on this period as the sort of the great period in Islam. After that, things really went haywire, as it were. But three of them were assassinated, so it was a very violent time. But the point is that the Kharijites were purist and absolutes. Faith without works is dead. You can see the reasoning here. You can see the behind it. Now here is a chart of the major divisions in Islam, Sunni and Shia. The Shiites have divided again and again into various types of Shiites. You have the Imamates, who are, this is a misspelling again, it's not Imamitis, it's Imamates. They are the Twelvers. They look and think of 12 Imams. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The 12th Imam is gone into hiding because of his fear for his life. But he will come again. There you have the Ismailis, who are seveners. They believe in 7 Imams. Then you have the Zaydis, who are believing in 5 Imams. So you have 12, 7, and 5. The Ismailis have broken into various groups. You notice here the divided line, which is a line of really, it's a heretical group. The Alawis more or less worship Ali. And interestingly enough, the leader in Syria is Alawite. Wonder how in the world they could get along, these guys, because here he is worshiping Ali. This is heretical, but somehow they overlook that in Syria and so on. And then the other group is the Druze. This group, the Druze, has been very much in opposition and at war with the Maronite Christians in Lebanon, also a militant group. Now let's look at the Sunnis, the much larger group. The Sunnis have, as we've previously said, they have divided up into 4 schools of law: Hanafis, the Shafis, the Malikis, and the Hanbalis. And if you're in the Muslim world, it might be of interest to ask what school of law rules there. Now, they did differ on some things, like how you deal with this situation and that situation, and how to deal with a a wife who doesn't obey or one thing or another. Significantly here too, there is a dotted line. That is the Ahmadiyas. They're considered to be non-Muslim. Originated in India. This guy was born, this guy by the name of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. He was born in the early 20th century, and people who follow him are given various names. Sometimes they're called by his middle name, Mirzais. Most of the time they're called Ahmadiyas from his main, his first name. But the Ahmadiyas too have broken into another group. Anyway, the Ahmadiyas are declared non-Muslim, were declared non-Muslim in 1974. Finally, now this is part of Pakistan, but it used to be India. They're declared non-Muslim because of their views about Muhammad, about Ahmad. You see, he came after Muhammad. And Muslims strongly hold to the seal of the prophets. Muhammad is the final, the greatest. All right, here comes this guy Ahmad. And he never said, really, that I am, in other words, clearly said that he was a prophet after Muhammad, but he talked like he had revelation from God, and he never used the technical word for inspiration, but he was pretty forceful. And then Maulana Maududi wrote, of course he opposed them. Maududi is a fundamentalist. And in 1953, he wrote a tract about them. I think it was the Qadiani question, he called it, because Ahmad was from a place in India called Qadiani. And so he criticized them and showed where they were wrong. And this has been in the history of Pakistan, and often there was persecution of them. And finally, in 1974, it blew out in the open, and they declared them non-Muslim. I had a friend in Pakistan who was Ahmadiyya, quite a scholar and a student of Islam and also of the scriptures. He was the one who told me that he had to read the Bible a couple of times before he even understood the Quran. He had a little bookshop in the city we lived in Dera Ghazi Khan, and he kept some various books there. And one day he went to the post office on his bicycle in 1974. When he came back, all his books were in the middle of the street on fire. And you see, when they were declared non-Muslim, then the Muslims broke into his shop, grabbed everything, the furniture and all the books, and took it out into the street, set fire to it. The Ahmadiyas were greatly persecuted, and all through history, and they were pretty aggressive. This one fellow I mentioned that read the scriptures, he was pretty mild, and we got along well. But oftentimes the Ahmadiyya were quite aggressive. I used to think of them as the JWs of Islam, because they would argue, and they were so much into polemics, and they wanted to destroy every faith, Christian faith, to show how good Muslims they were. But the truth is, they were considered to be heretics, and they've suffered, and they have, as a result, they have immigrated to the rest of the world. When I was in California in the 90s doing my PhD, there was quite a settlement there, a mosque of the Ahmadiyyas, and we in our church had one of the churches that I knew about, they had some mosque-church relationship, and we would speak, and they would speak, and we'd get together and have supper, and so we had some association with them. Now the Sunnis have broken up. They have actually not broken up, but there have been other offshoots like the Muslim Brotherhood that came out of Egypt, born in 1928 through a man by the name of al-Banna, and then another guy by the name of Qutb, who was the sort of theoretician of the Muslim Brotherhood, and it spread dramatically in the Middle East. Often it's been oppressed by the Egyptian government, and sometimes there's been given a little bit of freedom, but the al-Banna and Qutb both suffered martyrdom, and the Muslim Brotherhood has spread dramatically. Even today, one of my former students is doing his PhD on the Muslim Brotherhood in Indonesia primarily, and talks about how it is spread there. You have other Islamic associations too that have come out of the Muslim Brotherhood, like the Hamas in Gaza, who won the last election. All right. These are the divisions. Now here is a chart showing Muhammad, and it shows after Muhammad, the first, second, third, fourth caliph. It gives the years to Abu Bakr, 632 to 634. Then comes Umar, who has been called the Apostle Paul of Islam because of the way he spread it. He was a pretty stern fellow. Someone said that Umar was so stern that you didn't want to face him, and if you saw him coming down the street, Umar said that people would cross over rather than come to face with him. Obviously a stern fellow. Then was Uthman. Umar was very popular. He lived from 634 to 644, and then he was assassinated, and then comes Uthman, 644 through 656. It was under Uthman that the Quran was brought together. In other words, during his time, there was some disagreement over different versions of the Quran on the battlefield, and so Uthman gave the order. They brought together, had the thing organized, and came up with the Quranic version. It was his version, really. He tried to destroy all competing manuscripts, but wasn't successful because they still find some of them. Anyway, Uthman, 644 to 656, and then, as I said, finally Ali comes along, but a very short time indeed, from 656 until 661, when he is assassinated, and then you have these. He's the first imam, and then you have the various imams, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way to 12. Hussein is the third imam. The Hussein we're talking about, Hassan was the second, but Imam Hussein was the third, and he was killed in 680 AD. And then, as we've said, they divided over the sixth imam, and so you have the seveners, and then divided over the fivers. Over the seventh imam, and then you have the seveners, and the fivers, and so on. This 12th imam down here went into hiding, but he will come again, according to them. Look at how they have divided up the seveners, the Ismailis. These are generally pretty wealthy people. You see them in Karachi. You see them even in Calgary. So you had breakaways from that, and all kinds of things happened. But then the Twelvers, you find them mostly in Iran. The Sunnis have gone on and then kept up the caliphate until 1924. Many Muslims really want to bring the caliphate back. They want to bring it back. They yearn for it as the only legitimate type of Islamic government. And so in many cases, the fundamentalists are working to this end. They want the caliphate back again. Now, here is the final chart will show in the history of Islam, showing that, the different centuries, Muhammad, of course, and then, as we've already talked about, and his successors, the four rightly guided caliphs, and then the imams. On the one side, you see Muawiyah, or however you pronounce that, and then Yazid, who took over from him, and how he opposed Hussein and killed off his motley little army of 60 plus people, including the family. You see the various imams, and this is just a little different. It shows that there have been breakaways. It's not really fair to, the Wahhabis was a movement that happened in the 19th century in Saudi Arabia. I should have mentioned too that the Baha'is have broken away from the imamates, and they've been greatly persecuted in Iran. Perhaps the Shiites make 10, 15%, I'm not sure, but the Sunnis are the smashing majority. The Wahhabis was a movement reformist movement, if you can have it, not violent but conservative. In Saudi Arabia, that's the most conservative type of Islam that you can have today. They're purist in every sense of the word, absolutist. And of course, bin Laden was a Wahhabi, but he turned to violence, and many of the Saudis are not that way. But the Saudi government has allowed it, and in other words, they've, to keep peace, I guess, they've given far too much, and so you have these great divisions. Islam is very, very divided. What will happen in the 21st century, we don't know. But certainly the Lord is working, and the Lord wants Muslims to come to himself. We're seeing more fruit today among Muslims coming to Christ than ever before, and we know that not that they're coming despite the troubles of Islam, the Talibization, the extremism, the violence, but I think because of it, because of what some Muslims are doing, other Muslims are coming to Jesus as the only Savior.